The morning started like any other morning on Earth. People went to work, children went to school. Coffee shops opened their doors. No one knew that in just a few hours, everything would change forever. It was the year 2247. Humanity had grown beyond their small blue planet. They had built cities on Mars. They had created research stations on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Miners worked in the asteroid belt, pulling precious metals from floating rocks. Humans were proud of what they had built. They believed they were alone in the universe. They were wrong. At exactly 11:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the sky over every major city on Earth turned dark. People looked up and saw something that stopped their hearts. Ships. Thousands of ships. They were enormous, each one bigger than a mountain. They blocked out the sun and cast shadows over entire countries. The ships belonged to the Valorian Dominion. They had traveled across galaxies to reach Earth. The Valorians were an ancient species. They had existed for over 50,000 years. In that time, they had conquered 400 different alien species. They did not ask for permission. They did not make friends. They simply took what they wanted. Every television screen, every phone, every computer on Earth suddenly showed the same image. It was a face, but not a human face. The creature had gray skin that looked like stone. Its eyes were completely black, like two holes in space. When it spoke, its voice was cold and empty of any feeling. "I am High Arbiter Kethvan of the Valorian Dominion," the creature said. "Your species has been evaluated. You have been found suitable for collection. You have 72 hours to surrender completely. Your soldiers will join our armies. Your resources will be taken. Your history will be recorded and then erased. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is simply what will happen." The alien paused. Its black eyes seemed to look directly at every person watching. "We have calculated your military strength. It would take us 11 minutes to destroy your planet completely. Resistance is not logical. Resistance will only bring suffering. Surrender, and some of you will survive. Fight, and all of you will die." The transmission ended. For a moment, the entire world was silent. Then the chaos began. In the United Earth Council building in Geneva, the most powerful leaders in human history gathered around a long table. Generals showed them the numbers. The Valorian fleet had 3,000 warships. Earth had maybe 200 ships that could fight. The aliens had weapons that could crack planets in half. Humans had nuclear missiles that suddenly seemed like toys. "We cannot win this war," said General Morrison, the head of Earth's military forces. His face was pale. "The mathematics are simple. If we fight, we die. All of us. Every man, woman, and child on Earth and in the colonies." Politicians began talking about surrender. Maybe they could negotiate better terms. Maybe the Valorians would be merciful. Maybe survival was more important than pride. Secretary General Amaro Conquo sat quietly and listened to everyone speak. She was 63 years old. Her hair was gray, and her face was lined with wrinkles. She had been a combat medic in her youth. She had held dying soldiers in her arms. She had seen the worst things humans could do to each other. But she had also seen the best. When everyone else had finished talking, she stood up slowly. The room fell silent. "I have been listening to all of you," she said. Her voice was soft but steady. "I have heard the numbers. I understand the logic. I know that we cannot win this war. But I want to ask you all a question." She looked around the room at the frightened faces. 400 species, she continued. 400 different civilizations looked at those ships and made a choice. They chose to kneel. They chose to give up everything they were, everything they could have been, just to survive a little longer. And what happened to them? They became slaves. Their cultures were erased. Their children were taken to fight wars for their masters. They exist, but they do not live. She walked to the window and looked up at the dark shapes blocking the sky. These aliens have done this 400 times. They expect us to be like all the others. They expect us to be afraid. They expect us to beg. She turned back to face the room. "But they do not know us. They do not know what we are." General Morrison spoke up. "Madam Secretary, with respect, what we are is outmatched. What we are is facing extinction." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Yes, we are. But let me tell you something about humanity, General. We have never been a species that surrenders. When our ancestors faced lions with nothing but sticks, They did not surrender. When disease killed half of Europe, we did not surrender. When we faced world wars, when we faced nuclear weapons pointed at our own cities, we did not surrender. We fought. We survived. We grew stronger. She walked back to the table and placed both hands on its surface. If we surrender today, we will survive as bodies, but we will die as a people. Everything that makes us human, our music, our art, our dreams, our freedom, all of it will be erased. Our children will grow up as slaves, not knowing what it meant to be human. Her eyes were hard as steel. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. I would rather be the species that made the Dominion bleed than another forgotten name in their records. I would rather show the universe that there is one species, just one, that looked at impossible odds and said no. She straightened up and looked at each person in the room. I am not asking you to win. I am asking you to fight. I am asking you to make our enemies remember us. I am asking you to show every conquered species in the galaxy that the Dominion can be defied. Maybe we will all die. But if we die fighting, then our death means something. It becomes a message. It becomes hope for others. The room was completely silent. Then, slowly, General Morrison stood up. His face was no longer pale. Something had changed in his eyes. If we're going to war, he said, then let's give them a war they will never forget. One by one, every person in the room stood. The vote was unanimous. Humanity chose war. Within the hour, the message was sent to every human colony, every ship, every outpost. It was simple and short. We do not surrender. Prepare for war. On the Valorian flagship, High Arbiter Keth Von received the response. He read it 3 times, unable to understand. In 50,000 years, no species had ever refused. His advisors told him it must be a mistake. Surely the humans would reconsider. Keth Von looked at Earth on his view screen. Such a small planet, such a young species. They had only been traveling through space for 200 years. What made them think they could challenge an empire that had existed for millennia? They are either very brave or very stupid, he said to his officers. Either way, they will learn. Begin the invasion. But deep in his mind, a small voice whispered a warning. A species that chose death over surrender was not like the others. A species that fought without hope of winning was something new, something dangerous. He pushed the thought away. It did not matter. In a few weeks, Earth would fall like all the others. He was wrong. The Valorians expected Earth to fall quickly. They had done this 400 times before. First came fear, then came chaos, then came surrender. It was always the same. Every species followed the same pattern. Humanity did not follow the pattern. Within 6 hours of the war declaration, something strange began happening across human space. It was as if the entire species had been waiting for this moment. Factories that made cars began making weapons. Scientists who studied peaceful things began designing bombs. Old soldiers who had retired years ago put on their uniforms again. Young people who had never held a gun lined up at recruitment centers that stretched around entire city blocks. On Mars, General Dmitry Volkov walked into a mountain. Deep inside that mountain was a vault that had been sealed for 50 years. Inside were weapons so terrible that humanity had promised never to use them again. Volkov looked at the bombs and missiles and biological agents. He thought about his grandchildren on Earth. Open everything, he said. We're going to need all of it. In the asteroid belt, the miners received the news on their old radio systems. These were hard people. They lived in tiny ships, breathing recycled air, eating food that tasted like cardboard. They spent years away from Earth, cutting rocks apart for metals and minerals. They were not soldiers, but they were stubborn, and they were angry. A woman named Rosa Chen gathered the miners together in a large cargo bay. She was 50 years old, with hands rough from decades of work and eyes that had seen friends die in mining accidents. The company ships are too slow to run, she said. We can't go home. So we have 2 choices. We can hide and hope the aliens don't find us, or we can turn these mining ships into weapons and make them regret coming to our solar system. The vote was quick. Within days, mining lasers designed to cut asteroids were being modified to cut through alien armor. Industrial explosives meant for breaking rocks were being attached to drone ships. The miners had no military training. They had no fancy tactics, but they knew how to work with machines, and they knew how to improvise. The Valorians sent their first scout ships toward Earth on the 3rd day. There were 50 small vessels, each one designed to scan the planet and prepare for the main invasion. They expected no resistance. Their shields were not even activated. Captain Elena Vasquez was waiting for them. She was 34 years old, a pilot from Argentina who had joined Earth's small space navy 5 years ago. She had never seen real combat before. Now she was leading 12 fighter ships against an enemy that could destroy planets. "Remember the plan," she said to her squadron through the radio. "Fast and hard. Hit them before they know what's happening. Don't give them time to call for help." The human fighters came out of hiding from behind Earth's moon. They were tiny compared to the Valorian scouts. They were slower and weaker, but they had something the aliens did not expect: nuclear missiles modified to move at incredible speeds. The first wave of missiles hit 17 Valorian ships before their shields could activate. The explosions lit up the space around Earth like new suns. The remaining alien ships tried to retreat, but Vasquez's squadron was already among them, firing everything they had. The battle lasted 90 seconds. When it ended, all 50 Valorian scouts were destroyed. Vasquez had lost 4 fighters, but 12 pilots had just destroyed an entire alien squadron. On the Valorian flagship, High Arbiter Kethvan received the report. He read it twice. Then, he called his tactical officers to his command room. "Explain this," he demanded. The officers had no explanation. According to their calculations, Earth's fighters should have run away. The humans knew they were outmatched. Logic said they should have hidden and waited for mercy. Instead, they had attacked. "Perhaps they did not understand the odds," one officer suggested. "They understood," Kethvan said slowly. "They simply did not care." He ordered a larger force to approach Earth. This time, 300 warships moved toward the blue planet. Their shields were active. Their weapons were ready. They would crush any resistance. Captain Vasquez met them with her remaining 8 fighters. She knew she could not win. She knew she would die. But she also knew that every minute she fought was another minute for Earth to prepare. The battle lasted 4 hours. Vasquez's squadron used the debris from destroyed ships as cover. They fired missiles from behind asteroids. They played dead and then attacked when enemy ships came close to investigate. They used every trick they could think of. One by one, the human fighters were destroyed, but they did not go quietly. Each pilot aimed their dying ship at the nearest enemy. Each explosion took Valorian soldiers with it. When Vasquez's fighter was finally hit, its engines destroyed and its weapons empty, she pointed her broken ship at a Valorian cruiser and pushed her engines to maximum. Her last transmission was broadcast across all of Earth. "Make them remember us." The Valorians destroyed her ship before she could reach the cruiser, but her words spread like fire through humanity. Within hours, "Make them remember us," was written on walls in every city. Soldiers shouted it as they trained. Workers whispered it as they built weapons. It became more than words. It became a promise. The Valorians had expected to occupy Earth within a week. Instead, they found themselves fighting for every kilometer of space. Human ships attacked from the asteroid belt, from behind moons, from places the aliens never expected. The attacks were small, but they never stopped. Every time the Valorians destroyed one group of human fighters, another appeared somewhere else. Kethvan called a meeting of his commanders. "This is not logical," he said. "They know they cannot win. Why do they continue to fight?" His oldest commander, a veteran of 200 conquest campaigns, spoke carefully. "In all my years, I have never seen a species behave like this. Most species fight until they realize they cannot win, and then they surrender. These humans know they cannot win from the beginning. They fight anyway." "Why?" Kethvan demanded. The old commander was silent for a long moment. "I believe," he said slowly, "that they are not fighting to win. They are fighting to hurt us. They are fighting to prove something. They would rather die causing us pain than live as our servants." Kethvan considered this. "Then we will give them the death they want." "That is the problem, Arbiter," the old commander replied. "I do not think death scares them. I think what scares them is being forgotten. And as long as they keep fighting, as long as they keep hurting us, they know they will be remembered." The Valorian fleet had arrived at Earth expecting a quick victory. Instead, they found themselves in a war unlike any they had fought before. The humans were weaker, slower, and fewer. But they were also angrier, more stubborn, and completely unwilling to give up. It was like attacking a hornet's nest, Kethvan realized. You could crush the hornets. You would crush the hornets, but they would sting you hundreds of times before they died, and every sting would hurt. The war had just begun, and already the Dominion was bleeding. For the first time in 50,000 years, Kethvan felt something he did not recognize. It took him hours to identify the emotion. It was doubt, small and quiet, but growing. What if the mathematics were wrong? What if some things could not be calculated? He pushed the thoughts away and ordered another attack. There would be time for doubt later. Right now, there was a war to win, but the doubt remained, like a whisper in the dark corners of his mind, and it would only grow louder. 6 months had passed since the war began. 6 months of fire and death and endless fighting. Humanity was losing. Everyone knew it. The numbers did not lie. The outer colonies had fallen first. Small stations on distant moons were captured or destroyed. The people there had fought hard, but there were too few of them and too many enemies. Europa was gone. Its research stations burned to ash. The asteroid belt was a war zone, with human miners fighting desperate battles against Valorian patrol ships. Mars still held, but the red planet was scarred now. Great craters marked the places where Valorian bombs had fallen. Cities that had taken decades to build were now piles of rubble. Mass graves stretched across the rust-colored soil, filled with soldiers who had died defending their home. Yet something strange was happening, something the Valorians had never seen before. In the great council chambers of the Dominion, admirals and generals gathered to discuss the war. The mood was frustrated. This should have been finished months ago. The humans were weaker in every way, but the war continued. We have lost more ships in 6 months than we lost in the last 300 years of conquest, one admiral reported. The humans are everywhere. We destroy one group, and 3 more appear. They attack our supply lines. They hide in asteroid fields. They use civilian ships as weapons. High Arbiter Kethvan listened in silence. The war had changed him. He no longer spoke with the same cold confidence. There were lines on his face that had not been there before. We are fighting a war of attrition, he said finally. The humans cannot beat us in direct combat, so they have chosen to bleed us slowly. They accept losses that would break any other species. They trade 10 of their ships for 1 of ours and call it a victory. It is madness, another commander said. They are destroying themselves. No, Kethvan replied. They are destroying us, just very slowly. On Mars, in a bunker deep beneath Olympus Mons, a woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka was working on the most important project in human history. She was a physicist, small and quiet, with glasses that were always slightly crooked. Before the war, she had studied theoretical physics. Now she studied alien technology. The humans had captured a few small Valorian ships during the fighting. Most were too damaged to be useful, but the engines interested Tanaka. The Valorians used something called fold space technology to travel between stars. They could bend space itself, jumping from one point to another in seconds. Humanity had nothing like it. Their ships used old fusion engines that took months to travel between planets. If they could understand fold space technology, everything would change. Tanaka worked 20 hours a day. She slept on a cot in her laboratory. She forgot to eat until her assistants forced food into her hands. Around her, the war raged. Explosions shook the bunker. Soldiers died in the tunnels above her head, but she kept working. On the 200th day of the war, she finally succeeded. "It works," she whispered, staring at the small device on her table. It was ugly, covered in wires and patches, held together by hope and desperation. But it worked. She had built a fold space drive. The first human fold ship was completed 3 weeks later. It was small and fast, designed for hit-and-run attacks. The drive was unstable and dangerous. There was a 30% chance it would explode every time it was used. Volunteers lined up anyway. There were more volunteers than ships. Commander James Riley was chosen to lead the first fold ship squadron. His call sign was Ghost, earned during the early months of the war, when his small fleet had destroyed 17 Valorian supply ships without being seen. He was 40 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen too much death. The drive might kill you before you even reach the enemy, the engineers warned him. Then I'll be a ghost for real, Riley replied. The first fold ship attack changed the war. Riley's squadron appeared behind Valorian lines without warning. They destroyed a major supply depot and 3 escort ships, then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The Valorians had no idea how the humans had gotten there. More attacks followed. Human ships appeared in places they should not have been able to reach. They struck and disappeared like phantoms. The Valorians began to see threats everywhere. They pulled ships away from the front lines to guard against attacks that might never come. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Something the Dominion had not expected. On occupied Europa, a small group of human survivors had hidden in the frozen tunnels beneath the surface. They had no ships, no weapons, just a radio transmitter they had built from scraps. They used it to intercept Valorian communications and send the information back to Earth. What they discovered changed everything. The Dominion was not as united as it seemed. The 400 conquered species still existed, still had some limited freedom. They were slaves, but they were not mindless. They remembered what they had lost. They watched the war with great interest. The humans were doing something impossible. They were hurting the Dominion. They were making the great empire bleed. After thousands of years, someone was finally fighting back. Secretary General Okonkwo received the intelligence reports and made a decision. She broadcast a message on every frequency she could reach, aimed at the stars beyond Earth. To every species under the Dominion's control, she said, "I know you are watching. I know you remember what freedom felt like. We are humanity. We are small and weak, and we are probably going to lose this war. But we are still fighting. After 6 months, we are still standing. The Dominion told us we could not win. We told them we did not care." She paused and looked directly at the camera. "They are not invincible. They can be hurt. They can be defied. If enough of us fight, they can be beaten. We cannot promise you victory. We can only promise you that we will never stop fighting. Join us. Not for us, but for yourselves, for your children, for the memory of what you once were." The message spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Most conquered species were too afraid to respond. They had learned over centuries that resistance meant death. But in hidden rooms and secret gatherings, people began to whisper. They began to hope. On a distant planet called Veth, a species that had been conquered 3,000 years ago heard the message. They had not raised weapons against the Dominion in generations. They had accepted their slavery as permanent. An old Veth leader watched the human broadcast. He saw the fire in Secretary General Okonkwo's eyes. He remembered stories his grandfather had told him. Stories of a time when the Veth were free. "We have forgotten who we are," he said quietly to his followers. "These humans are reminding us. The seed of rebellion had been planted. It would take time to grow, but it was there, spreading slowly through the Dominion's vast empire. Back on Earth, the war continued. Every day brought more death, more destruction. Cities fell and rose and fell again. The human population dropped every month. Food was rationed, power was limited, life had become survival. But something had changed in humanity's eyes. They had started this war expecting to die. Now, for the first time, they began to believe they might live. The long night was far from over, but somewhere in the darkness, a light had begun to shine. 1 year, 365 days of war. The human race had survived longer than anyone thought possible, but survival was not victory, and the Dominion had finally decided to end the fight once and for all. High Arbiter Kethvan stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the fleet assemble. The Dominion Council had given him everything he asked for. The entire Second Fleet had been sent to human space, 2,000 warships, 50 planet crackers, weapons that could turn worlds into dust. This was the largest military force the Dominion had deployed in 3 centuries. It was designed to crush humanity completely. No more guerrilla attacks. No more hidden bases. The humans would be hunted down and destroyed. Every last one of them. "Today we end this," Kethvan announced to his officers. "No more games. No more patience. We burn their worlds and scatter their ashes across the void." But even as he spoke, reports were coming in from across the Empire. Something was happening. Something unprecedented. On the planet Veth, the slave population had risen against their masters. They had no real weapons, just tools and farming equipment, but there were millions of them, and they had finally remembered how to be angry. Dominion soldiers were fighting in the streets of cities that had been peaceful for 3,000 years. On the moon of Krath, Another conquered species had sabotaged the mining operations that provided fuel for Valorian ships. On 7 other worlds, similar rebellions were breaking out, small fires that threatened to become an inferno. "This is the humans' doing," Kethvan's advisor said. "Their broadcast inspired this. They have turned our own slaves against us. Then we will crush them all," Kethvan replied. Starting with Earth, on Mars, General Volkov watched the enemy fleet approach. He was old now, older than he had ever expected to be. The war had aged everyone, but there was a fire in his eyes that had not been there a year ago. "They're coming with everything," he said to his staff. "This is it. Win or lose, it ends today." Secretary General Okonkwo stood beside him. She had refused to stay safe on Earth. If humanity was going to make its last stand, she would be there to see it. "Are we ready?" she asked. Volkov smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "We've been ready for 6 months. Let me show you something." He led her to a massive hangar deep beneath the Martian surface. Inside were ships unlike anything humanity had built before. They were huge, bristling with weapons, their hulls thick with armor. There were 20 of them. "Project Prometheus," Volkov said. "We built them in secret, using every piece of Valorian technology we captured. The weapons are based on something Tanaka discovered in the alien engines. They harness the energy of dying stars. Will they be enough?" Okonkwo asked. "No," Volkov admitted. "But they'll make the enemy pay a price they never imagined." The Battle of Titan began at 0600 hours Earth time. The Valorian Second Fleet emerged from fold space near Saturn's largest moon, expecting to sweep through human defenses like a fire through paper. Instead, they found Admiral Kenji Nakamura waiting for them. Nakamura was 60 years old, a former merchant captain who had become a war hero through sheer stubbornness. He had lost his family in the first days of the invasion. He had nothing left to live for except victory. Under his command was every fighting ship humanity had left, 300 warships, plus thousands of smaller craft, mining vessels with welded-on weapons, cargo ships converted into missile platforms, civilian yachts piloted by volunteers who had never seen combat before. They were outnumbered 6-1, but they had something the Valorians did not expect. They had Project Prometheus. The 20 Prometheus dreadnoughts led the charge. Their starfire weapons tore through Valorian shields like they were made of paper. In the first hour of battle, they destroyed over 100 enemy ships, but the Dominion fleet was vast, and it adapted quickly. They focused their fire on the dreadnoughts, sacrificing dozens of their own ships to bring down each human vessel. One by one, the great ships fell. The battle became a nightmare of fire and death. Ships crashed into each other. Escape pods were shot down. The void around Titan filled with debris and bodies. Captain Rosa Chen, the old miner from the asteroid belt, commanded a converted cargo ship called the Defiant Hope. She had no military training. Her crew were miners, mechanics, and factory workers. Their ship had no shields and paper-thin armor, but Rosa Chen had been fighting this war from the beginning. She had watched friends die. She had held her ground when others ran, and she knew exactly what she was willing to sacrifice. "The Valorian carrier," she said to her crew. "That's our target." Her first officer looked at her with horror. "Captain, that ship is massive. We can't hurt it. Not from outside." Rosa agreed. "But our reactor is unstable. If we get inside their hangar bay before it blows." The crew understood. This was a one-way trip. Not one person hesitated. Not one person asked to leave. The Defiant Hope accelerated toward the Valorian carrier. Enemy fire tore at its hull. Systems failed. Crew members died at their stations, but the ship kept going. Piloted by people who had already accepted their fate, they made it into the carrier's hangar bay with seconds to spare. Rosa Chen closed her eyes and thought of her children, safe on Earth because of what she was about to do. The reactor exploded. The blast destroyed the carrier completely. The shockwave caught 6 nearby cruisers and tore them apart. In a single moment, Rosa Chen and her crew had done more damage than any fleet action in history. The battle lasted 11 hours. By the end, the space around Titan was a graveyard. Humanity had lost 60% of its navy. Over 100,000 soldiers were dead, but the Valorian Second Fleet was shattered. Of 2,000 warships, fewer than 400 remained. The rest were burning wreckage, floating in Saturn's rings. High Arbiter Kethvan stared at the reports in disbelief. This was impossible. The mathematics had been clear. Human victory had been calculated as a zero probability outcome. How? He whispered. How did they do this? His oldest advisor, the veteran of 200 campaigns, stood beside him. He looked old now too, broken by a war that defied everything he knew. They sacrificed themselves, the old commander said. Ship after ship flew directly into our vessels. Pilots rammed their fighters into our engines. That cargo ship deliberately exploded inside our carrier. He paused. They traded their lives for ours. And they considered it a fair exchange. Kethvan thought of all the species his people had conquered. None of them had ever done this. None of them had been willing to die so completely, so deliberately, just to hurt their enemy. Why? He asked. The same question he had asked so many times before. They fear death. I know they do. So why do they run toward it? The old commander was quiet for a long time. I think, he said slowly, that they fear something more than death. They fear being forgotten. They fear leaving nothing behind. By dying like this, they become legends. They become stories that will be told forever. For them, that is worth more than survival. Kethvan looked out at the burning remains of his fleet. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never expected to feel: respect and fear. The tide had turned. Humanity had won its first real victory. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had changed. The Dominion could be beaten, and the whole galaxy was watching. 2 years after the ultimatum, a single Valorian ship approached Earth. It was not a warship. It carried no weapons. A white flag, the universal sign of peace, was broadcast on all frequencies. The war had changed everything. After the Battle of Titan, the Dominion had tried to continue fighting. They sent more fleets. They bombed more colonies. They killed more humans. But it was never enough. For every human they killed, 2 more seemed to appear. For every ship they destroyed, the humans built 3 more. And across the galaxy, the fires of rebellion were spreading. 12 species had risen against their masters, inspired by humanity's impossible resistance. The Dominion was fighting on multiple fronts for the first time in millennia. Their ancient empire, which had seemed eternal and unbreakable, was cracking. The Dominion Council had made a decision. For the first time in 50,000 years, they would negotiate with a conquered species. Not because they wanted to, because they had no choice. High Arbiter Kethvan walked through the ruins of Geneva to meet Secretary General Okonkwo. The city was still being rebuilt. Craters marked the places where Valorian bombs had fallen. New buildings rose next to the rubble of old ones. Life was returning, slowly but surely. Kethvan looked different than he had 2 years ago. His stone-gray skin seemed thinner. His black eyes, which had once been cold and empty, now held something else. Weariness, doubt, perhaps even pain. He met Okonkwo in a plaza that had once held a beautiful fountain. The fountain was gone now, destroyed in an attack, but people had planted flowers in its place. Life growing where death had been. You wanted to meet here, Kethvan said. In the ruins. Why? Okonkwo looked around at the damaged buildings, the construction crews, the children playing in streets that had once been battlefields. Because I wanted you to see what we survived. What we are rebuilding. I wanted you to understand that you could not break us. Kethvan was silent for a moment, then he nodded slowly. The Dominion Council offers terms: full withdrawal from human space, recognition of your sovereignty, non-aggression treaties that will last for 1,000 years. And what do you want in return? Nothing. Only that you stop. Kethvan's voice was tired. Stop fighting. Stop inspiring others to fight. Let the galaxy return to order. Okonkwo studied him carefully. She had hated this creature once. She had dreamed of watching him die. But now, looking at his tired eyes and broken spirit, she felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, not friendship, but understanding. The other species, she said. The ones who rebelled because of us. What happens to them? Kethvan shifted uncomfortably. That is a separate matter. Internal Dominion affairs. No, Okonkwo said firmly. It is not separate. We did not fight this war just for ourselves. We fought it for everyone who had forgotten how to fight. Everyone who had given up hope. If we accept peace while they are still enslaved, then we have betrayed them. You ask for too much. The council will never agree. Okonkwo leaned forward. Then, the war continues. We have lost most of our people. Our cities are ruins. Our children have grown up knowing nothing but fighting. We have nothing left. She paused. And that makes us very dangerous, because people with nothing to lose will do anything. The negotiations lasted 6 months. They were difficult and painful. There were moments when war seemed ready to begin again. But slowly, painfully, an agreement took shape. The Dominion would withdraw from human space completely. They would recognize Earth and its colonies as independent territories, and they would release 12 species from their control. Not all the conquered peoples, not even most of them. But it was a beginning. On the day the treaty was signed, Kethvan asked to speak with Okonkwo alone. They walked through the gardens that had been planted in Geneva's ruins. Flowers bloomed everywhere, bright colors against the gray rubble. I must ask you something, Kethvan said. A question that has haunted me since this war began. Ask, why did you fight? His voice was genuinely curious, not angry or accusing. When I first came to Earth, I showed you what we were. I showed you the power we possessed. You knew you could not win. Your own generals told you it was impossible. Yet you chose war. Why? Okonkwo did not answer immediately. She bent down and picked a small flower, yellow and delicate. Do you know what this is called? She asked. It's a dandelion. Humans consider it a weed. We try to kill it, poison it, dig it out of our gardens. But it always comes back. Its seeds spread on the wind, and it grows everywhere. In sidewalk cracks, in abandoned lots, in places where nothing else can survive. She held up the flower. That is what we are, Arbiter. We are not the strongest species. We are not the smartest. We are not the oldest. But we survive. We adapt. We refuse to die. She dropped the flower and looked directly at Kethvan. 400 species surrendered to you. 400 civilizations decided that living as slaves was better than dying free. They made the logical choice, the safe choice. She shook her head. But we are not logical. We are not safe. We are stubborn, irrational creatures who would rather burn than kneel. But you knew you would lose. Kethvan pressed. Your own calculations showed 0 chance of victory. Yes, Okonkwo agreed. We knew. But we also knew something else. We knew that if we fought, truly fought with everything we had, we would hurt you. We would make you bleed. And even if we died, that blood would mean something. It would show the galaxy that the Dominion was not invincible. It would give hope to others. She smiled, and there was fierce pride in her eyes. We did not fight because we thought we could win. We fought because surrender was never who we were. We fought because our children deserved to grow up knowing that their parents chose death over chains. We fought because sometimes the only victory that matters is refusing to give up. Kethvan was silent for a long time. Around them, the sounds of construction filled the air. Humans rebuilding their world, just as they had rebuilt it so many times before. I understand now, he said quietly, why we have conquered 400 species, and why we will never conquer yours. He turned to face her fully and did something no Valorian had done to a member of a younger species in 50,000 years. He bowed, not a small nod, but a deep bow of genuine respect. You have taught us something, Secretary General, something we had forgotten in all our centuries of victory. You have reminded us that there are things more powerful than armies, more lasting than empires. He straightened up. You have reminded us of courage. Okonkwo accepted the bow with grace. Perhaps someday, our peoples can learn from each other, not as conquerors and slaves, but as equals. Perhaps, Kethvan agreed, though I suspect it will take my people a very long time to recover from this lesson. He boarded his ship and left Earth. The war was over. That night, Secretary General Okonkwo stood on a balcony and looked up at the stars. For the first time in 2 years, no enemy ships darkened the sky. The stars shone bright and clear, full of possibility. Humanity had not won the war in any traditional sense. They had lost millions of people. Their cities were damaged. Their economy was shattered. By any normal measure, they had been devastated, but they had survived. They had proven that courage and stubbornness could overcome impossible odds. They had inspired a galaxy to remember what freedom meant. And across that galaxy, on 100 different worlds, People looked up at those same stars and whispered a word that had been forbidden for thousands of years. Hope. The stars looked back at humanity with something new in their light. Not fear, not hunger, not indifference, respect, and somewhere, in the vast darkness between worlds, a story was being told. A story about a small species on a small planet who had looked at an empire of conquest and said the only word that mattered, no. It was a story that would be told for 10,000 years. And it always ended the same way. They expected us to kneel. They learned we would rather burn, but we did not burn. We rose. The council chamber was the largest room Admiral Helena Vasquez had ever seen. It stretched upward like a cathedral made of light and living crystal. Floating platforms held delegations from 100 different species. Strange lights danced in patterns she could not understand. The air smelled of flowers that did not grow on Earth and chemicals her body did not recognize. She stood on humanity's platform with her team of 6 diplomats behind her. They wore simple black uniforms, no medals, no decorations, just the small blue and green patch of Earth on their shoulders. Above them, arranged in a great semicircle, sat the 12. These were the elder species who had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had built empires when humans were still learning to make fire. They had charted the stars when Earth was covered in ice. And they had called humanity here to answer for its crimes. Ambassador Telos of the Shirani floated at the center of the 12. He was not made of flesh and blood like humans. His body was living crystal, shaped roughly like a tall, thin man. Light moved inside him in slow waves of blue and purple. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once. The council recognizes the delegation from Earth, Telos said. You have been summoned to address the matter of the Kepler incident. 3 months ago, your species launched an unprovoked military assault against the Veth Dominion. You destroyed 3 military stations. You killed thousands. You crippled an entire fleet. Helena kept her face calm. She had practiced this in the mirror for weeks. Show nothing. Give them nothing. The Veth Dominion is a protected member of this council, Telos continued. Your actions have broken the peace that has held for centuries. We are here to determine what justice requires. From a platform across the chamber, a harsh laugh echoed. Helena turned to look at the Veth delegation. The Veth were large creatures. They stood 8 feet tall with gray armored skin and 4 arms. Their heads were flat and wide, with small dark eyes that showed no emotion. They had conquered 6 star systems before joining the council. They had destroyed 17 species before that. High Arbiter Kolveth, leader of the Veth, stepped forward on his platform. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. The young species does not understand its place, Kolveth said. They have only been among the stars for 200 years. They are children playing with weapons they do not understand. The council should take their fleet, put them under supervision. Teach them how civilized species behave. Some of the 12 made sounds of agreement. Helena watched their reactions carefully. The Melodari representative, a being of flowing silver liquid in a containment suit, said nothing. The Torvani, massive creatures like walking mountains of moss and stone, rumbled quietly to themselves, but most of them nodded along with the Veth. Admiral Vasquez, Telos said, how does humanity respond to these charges? Helena stepped forward. The platform beneath her feet hummed with strange energy. She looked up at the 12, then across at the Veth, then around the chamber at all the species watching. Before I respond, she said, I want to make sure I understand the situation. The council is saying that humanity committed a crime by defending itself. Is that correct? Telos made a sound that might have been a sigh. You did not defend yourself, Admiral. You launched an offensive military operation into Veth space. After they attacked our colony, Helena said, there is some disagreement about what happened at Kepler 4, Telos replied. The Veth report that there was a border misunderstanding. Some shots were fired. Regrettable, but these things happen between species that share a border. Helena felt her hands want to form fists. She forced them to stay open. A misunderstanding, she repeated. Yes, Kolveth said, his voice filled with amusement. Your colony was in a disputed zone. Our patrol ships attempted to make contact. Your people panicked and fired first. We were forced to defend ourselves. I see, Helena said. And how many Veth died in this misunderstanding? Kolveth waved one of his 4 hands. A few patrol ships were damaged. Perhaps 30th lost their lives. And how many humans? There was silence in the chamber. I asked a question, Helena said. How many humans died on Kepler-4? We do not have exact numbers, Telos said carefully. The Veth report suggests 1,200,417. Helena's voice was steady. She had practiced saying that number until it no longer made her want to scream. That is how many humans died on Kepler-4. That is not a misunderstanding. That is not a border incident. You cannot trust human numbers, Kolveth interrupted. They exaggerate. I lost my son on Kepler-4. The chamber went silent. Helena looked directly at the Veth High Arbiter. His name was Marcus. He was 22 years old. He was a teacher at a school for young children. When your ships came, he helped evacuate his students to a shelter. Your soldiers found that shelter. They killed everyone inside. 43 children, 8 teachers, my son. She turned back to the 12. This is not about borders. This is not about misunderstandings. The Veth came to our world and murdered our people. We responded. Now you have called us here to apologize for surviving. Telos shifted on his platform. The light inside him flickered faster. Admiral, we understand your pain. Truly, we do. But you must understand the greater picture. The Veth have been part of this council for 3,000 years. They have helped maintain stability in this region. They are difficult. Yes, but peace requires that we work with difficult partners. Peace requires that we ignore mass murder. Helena asked. Peace requires compromise. Another of the 12 spoke. This was Counselor Vryn, a creature of floating tentacles and too many eyes. Your species is young. You do not understand how the galaxy works. The Veth made an error. We will ensure they pay a fine. Perhaps they will apologize. And then we move forward. A fine, Helena repeated. For 1 million dead. It is how things are done, Telos said. There was something in his voice that might have been sympathy, or might have been pity. Humanity must learn to accept the way the galaxy works. You cannot fight everyone. You cannot hold grudges forever. You must learn to let go. Helena looked at her delegation. They looked back at her. She saw the anger in their eyes, the grief, the burning need for justice that would never come from this chamber. She turned back to the council. We request a recess, she said. We need to consult with our government on Earth. Telos nodded. Granted. We will resume tomorrow. Use this time wisely, Admiral. The Council's patience is not unlimited. We expect humanity to come back, ready to accept responsibility and move toward healing. The platform began to descend, carrying the human delegation down toward the exit. As they dropped below the level of the other platforms, Helena heard Kolveth laugh again. The sound echoed through the chamber like the growl of a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. Helena said nothing. She kept her face blank, but inside her mind, she was counting the dead, counting the days humanity had waited for this moment, counting the hours until everything changed. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn something new about the young species from the small blue world. Tomorrow, humanity would stop asking for permission. The second day began with ceremony. The 12 entered their platforms one by one while music played from hidden speakers. Strange instruments made sounds that human ears found beautiful and disturbing at the same time. Lights danced in patterns meant to inspire awe and respect. Admiral Helena Vasquez watched it all with empty eyes. She had not slept. None of the human delegation had slept. They had spent the night preparing, checking, making sure everything was ready. Today would change everything. The Veth delegation arrived last. Kolveth walked with the slow confidence of someone who had already won. His advisors followed behind him, their flat heads turning to look at the humans with open contempt. The council session resumes, Ambassador Telos announced. His crystal body glowed brighter today, perhaps a sign of importance. We will now hear the official account of the Kepler incident as presented by the Veth Dominion. A Veth officer stepped forward on their platform. He activated a holographic display that floated in the center of the chamber. Images appeared showing Veth patrol ships approaching a planet. On the date in question, our patrol vessels approached the human colony of Kepler-4, the officer said. This colony was located in a zone that our government considers disputed territory. We attempted to make contact with colonial authorities to discuss the matter. The hologram showed the Veth ships moving closer to the planet. The humans responded with hostility. They fired upon our vessels without warning. In the confusion that followed, there was an exchange of weapons fire. Some colonial structures were damaged. We deeply regret any loss of life that may have occurred. Helena listened to every word. She memorized every lie. When the human military arrived, they did not seek to understand what had happened. The officer continued. They simply attacked. They destroyed our stations. They killed our people. This was not defense. This was revenge. This was murder. The Veth officer finished speaking. The chamber was quiet for a moment. Thank you for that account, Telos said. Admiral Vasquez, does humanity wish to respond? Helena stood. Yes. We have prepared testimony of our own. Telos nodded. You may proceed. Helena touched a device on her wrist. The Veth hologram disappeared. In its place, a new image appeared in the center of the chamber. It was a recording from a ship's black box. The image showed the inside of a civilian transport ship. Families sat in rows of seats. Children held toys. Old people held the hands of their loved ones. A woman in a pilot's uniform spoke calmly, telling everyone to stay seated, that they would reach the evacuation point soon. Then the ship shook. Alarms screamed. The pilot shouted that they were taking fire. The recording showed the passengers screaming as the ship broke apart around them. Through a crack in the hull, a Veth warship was visible, its weapons still firing. The last sound on the recording was a child crying for her mother. The hologram went dark. The chamber was silent. Helena did not let them look away. She activated another recording. This one showed a hospital. Doctors and nurses rushed to move patients to safety. A Veth soldier walked through the front door and raised his weapon. Another recording. A shelter full of children. The door being blown open. The screams that followed. Another, and another, and another. Helena played 12 recordings. Each one showed a different atrocity. Each one proved that the Veth had not made a mistake. They had not been confused. They had come to Kepler IV to kill. When the last recording ended, Helena spoke into the silence. 1,200,417 people, she said. Those are not numbers. They were teachers and doctors. They were farmers and engineers. They were mothers and fathers and children. They had names. They had dreams. They had lives that were stolen from them. She looked at Kolveth. The Veth leader's face showed nothing. This is what the Veth call a misunderstanding, Helena continued. This is what they call a border incident. She touched her device again. A new display appeared, but this one was not a recording. It was a list. Species names scrolled past, one after another. The Vorali, extinct. The Kelish, extinct. The Temera, reduced to 300 survivors living on a moon. The Greshni, extinct. The Hollow Singers, extinct. The list continued. 17 names, 17 species that had encountered the Veth over the past 3,000 years. Every single one of these species had a border misunderstanding with the Veth Dominion, Helena said. Every single time, this council did nothing. You expressed concern. You called for calm. You suggested compromise. And then you watched as entire civilizations were erased from existence. Telos spoke, his voice tight. Admiral, these historical matters are not relevant to. They are completely relevant, Helena interrupted, because they show the truth. The Veth are not difficult partners who sometimes make mistakes. They are predators who choose weak victims. They attack species that cannot fight back. They commit genocide against anyone who has something they want. And this council protects them. Kolveth finally reacted. He slammed one of his fists against his platform's railing. This is outrageous. These accusations are lies. Propaganda invented by a species too primitive to understand galactic politics. Primitive. Helena's voice was calm, but there was ice in it. We are primitive because we believe that murder should have consequences. We are primitive because we think that children should not be burned alive in shelters. We are primitive because we refuse to accept that some species are allowed to kill without punishment. She turned to face the full council. For 50 years, humanity has sat in this chamber. We have followed your rules. We have respected your traditions. We have begged for justice when our people were killed. Our ships were stolen. Our colonies were raided. And every single time, you told us to be patient, to trust the process, to understand that peace requires sacrifice. Her voice grew harder. You never meant our enemies should sacrifice. You meant us. You meant that we should sacrifice our dead, our dignity, our right to exist, because that is what peace means in this chamber. The weak suffer, so the strong do not have to change. Telos raised a hand. Admiral, this is inappropriate. You are allowing emotion to cloud your judgment. No, Helena said. For the first time I am seeing clearly. The chamber exploded into noise. Species shouted at each other. The Veth demanded that the humans be removed. Some of the younger species, those who had been quiet until now, began calling out in support of humanity. Telos finally restored order. The light inside him was flickering rapidly now, a sign of distress. This session will take a brief pause, he announced. When we return, the Council will present a final resolution for the Kepler matter. Humanity will have the opportunity to accept or reject our terms. He looked down at Helena. I urge you to consider your position carefully, Admiral. The Council has been patient with your species. That patience has limits. We are offering you a path back to peace. I suggest you take it. Helena nodded slowly. We will consider your offer. As the platform carried her down, she caught a glimpse of the Melodari delegate. The silver liquid creature was watching her closely. It gave her the smallest possible nod. Good. The message had been received. Tonight, while the Council prepared their demands, humanity would prepare something else. 50 years of patience was about to end. The human embassy on Nexus Prime was small. It occupied a single building near the edge of the diplomatic district. While the elder species had grand towers that touched the clouds, humanity had a simple structure of stone and glass. It was designed to look humble, unthreatening, easy to overlook. This was intentional. Admiral Helena Vasquez stood in the basement of that building. The room around her was nothing like the modest offices above. Here, screens covered every wall. Holographic displays showed star maps and fleet positions. Communication equipment hummed with encrypted signals bouncing between Nexus Prime and Earth. Operation Prometheus is fully active, said General James Chen from a screen on the main wall. He was speaking from Earth, from a bunker buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. All assets are in position. We're waiting for your signal. Helena nodded. How long have we been preparing for this? Officially? 32 years. Chen's face was grim. Unofficially? Since the day we realized what the Council really was. Helena remembered that day. She had been a young officer then, assigned to observe Council proceedings. She had watched as a species called the Temura begged for help. The Veth had been attacking their worlds. They had nowhere to run. They asked the Council for protection. The Council had expressed concern. They had called for both sides to show restraint. They had suggested that the Temura might have done something to provoke the attacks. 3 years later, the Temura were almost extinct. Helena had gone home and written a report. She had said that the Council was not a government of justice. It was a system designed to protect the strong and consume the weak. Humanity would eventually become a target. They needed to prepare. Her superiors had read the report. They had agreed. And then they had buried it so deep that no one outside a small circle would ever know. For 3 decades, while humanity played the role of the obedient young species, they had been building hidden shipyards in asteroid fields, weapons programs disguised as mining operations, alliances forged in secret with other species who had been victimized by the Council's protected members. The Melodari are in, Chen reported. Ambassador Yuran Shah confirmed their participation an hour ago. The Torvani Council voted this morning. They're with us. The Vessel Collective transmitted their agreement through quantum relay. 3 other species are finalizing their decisions, but our contacts say they'll join. Helena closed her eyes. 7 species. 7 young civilizations who had been told they were too primitive to matter. 7 peoples who had lost worlds and lives to the Council's pet predators. What about the Veth? She asked. Chen's face changed. There was something cold there. Something that matched what Helena felt in her own heart. Phantom Fleet has been in position for 48 hours. 23 stealth ships surrounding every major Veth military installation. They don't know we're there. The moment you give the word, we can eliminate their entire military capability in less than an hour. Helena opened her eyes. We're not doing that unless they force us. We're not them. Understood. But if they attack anyone in our alliance, the response will be immediate and complete. They need to understand that. A chime sounded. Someone was at the embassy door. Helena checked the security feed. A figure in a silver containment suit stood outside. The Melodari delegate, Counselor Urin Shah. "Let them in," Helena ordered. Minutes later, Urin Shah flowed into the basement room. The liquid body moved like mercury inside the transparent suit. A voice synthesizer translated their thoughts into words. "Admiral Vasquez, I came to give you a warning. We welcome any information you can share." Urin Shah moved closer to the screens, showing the fleet positions. The silver body paused, taking in what they saw. "You have been busy," Urin Shah said. "We suspected humanity was hiding its true strength. We did not realize how much. We learned from watching the Council," Helena replied. "The weak get destroyed. We decided not to be weak. A wise choice. But my warning is this. The Council is not planning to accept your response today. They have already decided what will happen tomorrow. They will demand that humanity accept a peacekeeping force in your space. Your ships will be inspected. Your weapons will be catalogued and limited. Your colonies will be monitored." Helena's face showed no surprise. "We expected something like this. There is more. If you refuse, they will authorize the Veth to enforce their demands. The elder species will not fight you directly, but they will allow others to do it for them. They will call it restoring order. They will say humanity left them no choice. And if we accept their demands," Urin Shah's liquid body rippled. "It might have been a laugh. Then they will take your ships piece by piece. They will restrict your growth. They will ensure you never become a threat. In 50 years, humanity will be a shadow. In 100 years, you may not exist at all." Helena nodded slowly. "Thank you for confirming what we already believed. I did not come only to warn you," Urin Shah said. "I came to ask a question. When you walk away tomorrow, what happens next? You have ships, you have allies, but the Council has ruled for 10,000 years. They will not simply accept your departure." Helena turned to face the Melodari fully. "We are not trying to destroy the Council. We are not trying to conquer anyone. We simply want to be left alone. We want to build our own future with species who share our values. If the Council accepts that, there will be peace, real peace. Not the kind they sell in that chamber. And if they do not accept," Helena's voice was quiet but hard as iron, "then they will learn what happens when you push a species until they have nothing left to lose. Humanity does not fight for territory. We do not fight for resources. We fight because we remember. Every name, every face, every child who died screaming in a shelter while the Veth laughed." She stepped closer to Urin Shah. "We have been watching for 50 years. We know how the elder species think. They believe that younger species will always back down when threatened. They believe that we are afraid of them. They are wrong. We are not afraid. We are angry. And we have been planning for this moment since before most of their diplomats were born." Urin Shah was silent for a long moment. Then the silver body shifted, forming something that might have been a bow. "The Melodari stand with humanity. Whatever comes next. Thank you. Your people should prepare. After tomorrow nothing will be the same." Urin Shah left. Helena turned back to the screens. General Chen was waiting. "Admiral, is it time?" Helena looked at the star maps, at the fleet positions, at the names of species who had put their trust in humanity. She thought of her son, of the recording she had never shown the Council, the one where Marcus stood in front of 43 children, telling them not to be afraid, telling them that help was coming. Help had not come in time, but it was coming now. "Yes," Helena said. "It's time. Send the signal. Tomorrow, we walk." The Council chamber was more crowded than Helena had ever seen it. Word had spread about the confrontation between humanity and the Veth. Species from across the sector had sent observers. News drones floated near the ceiling, broadcasting the proceedings to billions of viewers on thousands of worlds. Everyone wanted to see what would happen to the troublesome young species from Earth. Helena stood on the human platform with her delegation behind her. They wore the same simple black uniforms as before. But today, there was something different in how they stood. Their backs were straighter, their eyes were clearer. They looked like people who had made a decision and were at peace with it. Ambassador Telos called the session to order. The light inside his crystal body was brighter than ever. "We have considered the testimony presented yesterday," Telos announced. "We have consulted with all relevant parties. We have weighed the needs of peace against the demands of justice. The Council is now prepared to present its final resolution." He paused, as if expecting drama. "Regarding the Kepler incident, The Council acknowledges that the Veth Dominion may have used excessive force. However, we also recognize that humanity's response was disproportionate and destabilizing. Both parties bear responsibility for what occurred. Helena heard one of her diplomats make a small sound of disgust. She silenced them with a look. Therefore, the Council proposes the following resolution. The Veth Dominion will pay a fine of 50 million credits to a humanitarian fund. They will issue a statement of regret regarding the loss of life. In return, humanity will accept the following terms. Telos listed them one by one. Humanity would reduce its military fleet by 60%. All human warships would be inspected by Council observers. Human colonies near Veth space would accept peacekeeping forces. Human weapons development programs would be suspended for 20 years. And finally, humanity would pay reparations to the Veth Dominion for the ships destroyed in the retaliatory strike. When Telos finished, the chamber was silent. The Veth delegation looked satisfied. Several of the elder species nodded approvingly. This was how things were done. The young species would complain, but they would accept. They always did. Admiral Vasquez, Telos said. How does humanity respond? Helena stepped forward to the edge of her platform. May I ask a question first? Telos hesitated, then nodded. You may. In 10,000 years of Council history, has any resolution ever required an aggressor species to face real consequences? Has any species that committed genocide ever been punished beyond a fine and a statement of regret? The chamber stirred uncomfortably. Admiral, that is not relevant to. Please answer the question. Telos was silent. I will answer for you, Helena said. No. Never. Not once in 10,000 years. The strong take what they want. The weak accept what they must. That is the Council's version of peace. She looked around the chamber. Humanity came to the stars 200 years ago. We were so excited. We thought we would find wisdom out here. We thought we would find friends. We thought the elder species would teach us how to be better. Her voice grew harder. Instead, we found this. A chamber where murderers sit in judgment of their victims. A system designed to protect the powerful and consume everyone else. A peace built on the bones of 17 extinct species. Kolveth laughed from his platform. Listen to them. Such drama. Such emotion. This is why young species cannot be trusted with real power. They cannot control themselves. Helena turned to face the Veth leader directly. You are right about one thing. We cannot control ourselves. Not anymore. We are done pretending. We are done asking for justice from people who do not believe in it. She touched her wrist device. Every screen in the chamber flickered. The Council's display systems were overridden. New images appeared on every surface. Ships. Thousands of ships. Human warships emerging from hidden positions throughout the sector. Designs the Council had never seen. Weapons, systems that should not exist. A fleet that dwarfed anything humanity was supposed to possess. The chamber erupted in chaos. What is this? Telos demanded. What have you done? Helena raised her voice above the noise. This is what we have been doing for the past 30 years while you watched us and laughed at our weakness. This is what we built while you told us to trust the process. She touched her device again. More images appeared. The Melodari ambassador stood on their platform as a symbol appeared behind them. A new flag. A new alliance. The Melodari confluence formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, Urinsha announced. We join the Human Coalition. Another platform lit up. The Torvani delegate, a mountain of stone and moss, spoke in a voice like grinding boulders. The Torvani collective withdraws from the Galactic Council. We join the Human Coalition. One by one, 6 more species made the same announcement. Species that had been told they were too young. Species that had lost worlds to the Council's protected members. Species that had been waiting for someone to stand up first. The chamber was in complete chaos now. The 12 were shouting at each other. Delegations were trying to leave. Observers were screaming into communication devices. Kolveth pushed forward on his platform, his face twisted with rage. You think this changes anything? Your little alliance means nothing. The Veth Dominion will crush you. We will burn your worlds just like we burned Kepler. Helena smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. High Arbiter, I think you should check on your fleet. Kolveth froze. He turned to one of his officers, who was frantically working a communication device. The officer's face went pale. He looked at his leader and shook his head slowly. Right now, Helena said. 23 human stealth ships are positioned around every major Veth military installation. Your commanders have already received our message. If any Veth vessel fires a single shot at any member of our coalition, we will eliminate your entire military capability within the hour. She let that sink in. We do not want war. We want to be left alone. But if you come for us, if you come for any of our allies, you will learn something that you forgot a long time ago. She stepped back from the edge of the platform. Humanity does not fight for territory. We do not fight for resources. We fight because we remember. Every name, every face, every child who died in a shelter while your soldiers laughed. We remember all of them, and we will never, ever stop. She turned toward the exit. Admiral Vasquez, Telos called out. His voice was different now. There was something in it that might have been fear. You cannot do this. You will destabilize everything we have built. There will be chaos. Helena paused at the edge of the platform. She looked back at the crystal being who had ruled this chamber for centuries. Your order was built on bones. Let something better grow from the ashes. She walked forward. Her delegation followed. Behind them, the council chamber dissolved into screaming and confusion. The Veth were shouting threats that no one believed anymore. The elder species were arguing about what to do. The younger species were watching the humans with something new in their eyes. Hope. Helena did not look back. She walked out of the chamber, through the great doors, into the light of an alien sun. Behind her, 10,000 years of galactic order crumbled. Ahead of her, something new was waiting to be born. 1 year had passed since humanity walked out of the council chamber. The galaxy was different now. On Earth, the celebration had lasted for weeks. People filled the streets of every city, waving flags and singing songs. For the first time in 50 years, humanity did not have to bow to anyone. They were free. They were strong. They were no longer alone. The human coalition had grown. What started as 8 species had become 15, then 20, then more. Every few months, another young civilization made the journey to Earth to sign the Exodus Accords. They came because they had heard the story. They came because they finally believed that things could change. The coalition was not an empire. It had no emperor. It had no demands for tribute or obedience. Each species governed itself. They traded freely. They shared technology. They helped each other build defenses so that no predator species could ever threaten them again. On the first anniversary of the walk, representatives from all coalition species gathered on Earth. They stood in a great assembly hall built specifically for this purpose. Unlike the council chamber, this hall had no floating platforms to separate the powerful from the weak. Everyone stood on the same level. Everyone's voice mattered the same. Admiral Helena Vasquez stood at the center of the gathering. She was not the leader of the coalition. There was no single leader, but she had become its symbol. The woman who stood up when no one else would. She spoke briefly, thanking everyone who had trusted humanity when the future was uncertain. Then she stepped back and let others talk. Young diplomats from species who had never had a voice in galactic affairs. Survivors from worlds the Veth had devastated. Children of the Temera, the species that had been almost destroyed, now rebuilding their civilization with coalition help. The celebration continued late into the night. Helena slipped away before it ended. She had somewhere else to be. On Nexus Prime, the council was falling apart. Ambassador Telos sat alone in the great chamber. It was empty now. No delegations, no ceremonies, no grand pronouncements, just a being of living crystal, surrounded by the ghosts of 10,000 years. 3 more species had left the council in the past month. Others were talking about it. The 12 were no longer 12. Only 7 of the elder species remained loyal to the old system. Telos understood now what he had not understood before. The council had never been about peace. It had been about control. The elder species had maintained their power by making sure no young civilization could ever grow strong enough to challenge them. They had used predators like the Veth as weapons, allowing them to cull any species that showed too much promise, and they had believed it would last forever. A junior aide entered the chamber. Ambassador, there is a message from the Greshni. Telos looked up. The Greshni had been destroyed by the Veth over 1,000 years ago. Or so everyone believed. The Greshni are extinct, Telos said. Apparently not. A small population survived in hiding. They are asking to join the human coalition. They wanted us to know before the announcement. Telos said nothing. What was there to say? In Veth space, Everything had collapsed. The Great Dominion, which had terrorized the galaxy for 3,000 years, was gone. Not destroyed by human weapons, destroyed by itself. When word spread that humanity had neutralized the Veth military, the species they had conquered began to rise up. Slave populations broke free. Client states declared independence. Rival factions within the Dominion itself started fighting for control. High Arbiter Kolveth had been killed by his own officers, who blamed him for the humiliation. The officers were then killed by their subordinates. The cycle of violence continued until there was no one left in charge. Human ships watched from a distance. They did not interfere. They did not need to. Sometimes, Helena thought, the best revenge was simply stepping back and letting evil destroy itself. On Kepler 4, the memorial stood in the center of what had once been the capital city. It was a simple structure. A wall of black stone with names carved into it. 1,200,417 names. It had taken teams of artists working in shifts to complete it. Some of the names had no families left to provide them. Those were given by the computer that had processed the death records. Helena stood before the wall. She was alone. No security, no aides, just a woman and a wall full of names. She found the one she was looking for. Marcus Vasquez. It was carved at eye level, exactly where she had asked them to put it. "Hey, baby," she said quietly. "It's been a while." She told him about the coalition, about the celebration on Earth, about the Greshny survivors who had emerged from hiding after 1,000 years because they finally believed it was safe. "I wish you could see it," she said. "All these people, working together, building something new, something good." She touched the letters of his name. "You always believed we could be better. You used to argue with me about it, remember? I was so cynical. I thought the galaxy would never change." She smiled, but there were tears on her face. "You were right. It just took us a while to catch up." A sound behind her made her turn. A transport ship was landing at the small port near the memorial. Helena watched as the doors opened, and passengers began to exit. They were Veth. Helena's hand moved instinctively toward the weapon at her side. Old habits died hard, but these Veth were different from the soldiers she remembered. They were thin, tired. Many of them carried children or supported elderly family members. Their eyes were not filled with contempt. They were filled with fear. Refugees, fleeing the civil war that had destroyed their civilization. The colony governor approached Helena. "Admiral, we received their distress call 3 days ago. They're asking for asylum. What should we do?" Helena watched the Veth refugees gather in the port. She saw a mother holding a baby. She saw an old male struggling to walk, leaning on a younger female. She saw children looking around at the human buildings with wide, frightened eyes. She thought about what the old council would have done. Express concern. Call for calm. Suggest that both sides show restraint. Let the weak suffer so the strong did not have to change. She thought about what the Veth had done to her world, to her son, to all the species they had slaughtered over 3,000 years. She thought about what humanity had always claimed to believe, that every life had value, that justice meant more than revenge, that the measure of a civilization was how it treated those who could not fight back. "Let them land," she said finally. "Check them for weapons, give them food and shelter." The governor nodded but hesitated. And then, Helena looked at the memorial wall, at her son's name, at all the other names, and then make sure they see exactly who we are. We are not the council. We do not punish children for their parents' sins. We do not become monsters just because monsters hurt us. She turned away from the wall. Help them, all of them. And when they ask why, tell them the truth. Tell them that this is what humanity chooses to be. Not because it is easy, because it is right. The Veth refugees landed. Human medics approached them. Food and water were distributed. Children were given blankets and toys. One of the Veth mothers looked up at the memorial wall. She saw the names. She understood what they meant. She began to weep. Helena did not watch. She walked back toward the settlement, toward the new buildings rising from the ashes of the old ones. Behind her, the stars were coming out. The same stars that had watched humanity's birth. The same stars that had seen the council's rise and fall. The same stars that would see whatever came next. Somewhere out in the dark, the old order was crumbling, and something new was taking its first, uncertain steps. Humanity walked forward, not as conquerors, not as victims, as exactly what they had always been: stubborn, angry, compassionate, unbroken. The sun set over Kepler the 4. In the morning, there would be work to do. There would be refugees to resettle, alliances to strengthen, a new galaxy to build. But for now, there was only the quiet, the stars, and the names of those who had been lost, shining in the darkness, never forgotten, never again, the end.
The Grand Hall of the Galactic Conclave buzzed with the voices of 30 different alien species. Captain Jack Harrison stood tall despite feeling small. His blue uniform of the Earth Defense Fleet was crisp and new compared to the elaborate robes and armor of the other delegates. "Remember," said his second-in-command, Lisa Daniels, "we're here to make friends, not enemies." Jack nodded. Earth had only discovered faster-than-light travel 5 years ago. They were babies in this cosmic community. Most aliens looked at humans with curiosity or indifference. But the Vrikari were different. The Vrikari delegation sat across the room. Their scaled bodies were twice as tall as a human. Their 4 arms ended in clawed hands. Jack had been briefed about them. The Vrikari Empire controlled 15 star systems and was known for their military might. "The human delegation may approach," announced the conclave speaker, a jellyfish-like creature floating in a gravity bubble. Jack walked forward, his heart beating fast. This was humanity's formal introduction to the galaxy. He had practiced his speech for weeks. "Honorable members of the Galactic Conclave," Jack began, "Earth extends its hand in friendship and peaceful cooperation." Several alien species made sounds of approval. Some even clapped their tentacles or wings together. But the Vrikari ambassador, General Drac, simply stared with his yellow eyes. "We may be new to the stars," Jack continued, "but humans have much to offer. Our art, our science, our unique perspective." "Enough of this nonsense," interrupted General Drac. His translator device made his voice sound like gravel. "We have studied your species. You are nothing but primitive primates who got lucky with technology." A hush fell over the hall. Jack kept his face calm even as anger rose in his chest. "With respect, General," Jack said, "we came here to build relationships, not to be insulted." The Vrikari delegation laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You think you deserve respect." General Drac stood up. He towered over Jack. "Your people spent most of their history killing each other over tiny patches of dirt. You are violent, short-lived, and weak." Jack took a deep breath. "We have made mistakes, yes, but we have learned from them. We seek peace." General Drac moved closer. "Peace? Your history shows you don't even know the meaning of the word." The tension in the room was thick. Other alien delegates watched nervously. Some were already backing away. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion later," Jack suggested, trying to be diplomatic. General Drac leaned down until his face was inches from Jack's. Then he did something unexpected. He spat directly into Jack's face. The thick, green fluid dripped down Jack's cheek. He wiped it away slowly, fighting every instinct to respond with force. "In my culture," Jack said quietly, "that would be considered extremely rude." What Jack didn't know was that in Vrikari culture, spitting on someone was not just rude. It was a formal declaration of war. General Drac smiled. "The Vrikari Empire does not negotiate with lesser beings." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the conclave hall. Lisa ran to Jack's side. "Captain, 3 Vrikari warships just appeared from hyperspace. They're attacking our vessel." Before Jack could respond, a massive explosion shook the station. The conclave erupted into chaos. This was a trap, Jack realized. He grabbed his communicator. "All Earth personnel, evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." As they ran for their ship, Lisa looked at Jack with confusion. "What just happened? We didn't do anything to provoke them." Jack had no answer. He didn't understand that he had just been pulled into a war with one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. What the Vrikari didn't understand was that they had just declared war on the most lethal species in the known universe. They would learn their mistakes soon enough. General Drac stood proudly before the Fricari High Command. Large screens displayed the damage done to the human ships. The curved wall of the war room glowed with red light that reflected off their scales. The humans never saw it coming, Drac boasted. Their faces showed confusion, not fear. They didn't even understand they were at war. Supreme Commander Voss clicked his claws together in approval. An excellent strategy, General. The element of surprise gives us a great advantage. The 7 members of the High Command sat at a round table. They were the most powerful Fricari in the Empire. Each controlled massive fleets and armies. "Show us what we know about these humans," ordered Voss. A hologram appeared in the center of the table. It showed human anatomy. 2 arms, 2 legs, a soft body with no natural armor. "As you can see," said General Drac, "humans are physically weak. They have no claws, no venom, and poor senses. Their planet has low gravity, making their bones fragile compared to ours. Yet they managed to develop space travel," noted Commander Zira, the only female on the council. Drac waved a dismissive hand. "Pure luck." Their scientific development was chaotic and unplanned. They stumbled upon faster-than-light travel through a series of accidents. "What about their weapons?" asked another commander. "Basic energy weapons, nothing we haven't seen before," Drac replied. "Their ships are poorly armored. We stole their military database. Their tactics are simple and predictable." The meeting was interrupted by a young officer who rushed in. He bowed deeply before speaking. "Supreme Commander, we have received a message from Earth. Their governments are asking why we attacked their ships. They claim they don't understand what provoked us." The High Command laughed together. It was a harsh, grating sound. "They play innocent," said Voss. "How amusing. Shall I prepare a response?" asked the young officer. "No response is needed," Drac said. "Our next attacks will make our intentions clear enough." In a different part of space, Admiral William Reeves stood before Earth's United Defense Council. The room was filled with representatives from every major nation on Earth. The attack was unprovoked, Reeves explained. Captain Harrison was following diplomatic protocol when the Fricari suddenly opened fire. "How many casualties?" asked the council president. 27 dead, 15 wounded," Reeves replied. His voice was tight with anger. "The Fricari specifically targeted our engines to prevent escape. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a planned ambush." Lisa Daniels stepped forward. Her uniform was still stained with blood from helping the wounded. "Intelligence has discovered something important," she said. "The Fricari have already begun attacking our outer colonies. The research station near Alpha Centauri was hit an hour ago." Gasps filled the room. The research station was primarily civilian, scientists and their families. "Casualties?" someone asked, voice shaking. 342 confirmed dead," Lisa answered quietly, "including 86 children." Silence fell over the room. Then the council president spoke. "Admiral Reeves, what do you recommend?" Reeves straightened his back. "The Fricari clearly want war. All attempts at communication have been ignored. I suggest we give them exactly what they're asking for." "But their empire is vast," protested one council member. "They have 15 star systems, hundreds of warships. We've barely established colonies on 3 planets." "Numbers don't tell the whole story," Reeves said firmly. "The Fricari think they know what humans are capable of. They're wrong." "What response should we send them?" asked the president. Reeves thought for a moment. "Something simple. Something they'll understand later, when it's too late." He paused. "Send this message. You've made a terrible mistake." In his war room, Supreme Commander Voss received the human message. He read it and laughed. "Look at this pathetic threat," he told his commanders. "These humans think they can stand against the might of our empire." If only he knew what was coming. For the first time in human history, Earth stood united. The attack on the research station changed everything. Old enemies became allies. Borders that had divided nations for centuries now meant nothing. Commander Susan Blackwood stared at the wall of screens in Earth Defense Headquarters. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. Her brother had been on that research station. He was a botanist studying alien plants. Now he was gone. "Commander, the United Earth Fleet is assembled," said her aide, Lieutenant Greg Foster. Susan nodded. On the main screen, hundreds of ships gathered in Earth orbit. Some were old military vessels. Others were civilian ships hastily fitted with weapons. It wasn't much compared to the Valkyrie fleet, but it was only the beginning. "What's the status of Project Awakening?" she asked. Greg checked his tablet. "The first wave of dormant defense systems is online. The Valkyrie don't know about them." Susan allowed herself a small smile. For decades, Earth nations had hidden their most advanced weapons from each other. Now those secrets were being shared and deployed together. "And the AI combat systems?" "Ready," Greg replied. "We kept those off the official military database that the Valkyrie stole. They have no idea what's coming." In another part of the galaxy, a Valkyrie scout ship detected an unusual signal. They followed it to a small human vessel that appeared to be damaged. "Prepare to board," ordered Captain Krell. "Take prisoners for questioning." The Valkyrie soldiers stormed the human ship with weapons ready. They found 5 human crew members who immediately raised their hands in surrender. "You are now prisoners of the Valkyrie Empire," announced the Valkyrie leader. "Resistance is useless." The humans exchanged glances. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of surrendering, the humans attacked with hidden weapons. They fought fiercely despite being outnumbered. Captain Krell watched in disbelief as his soldiers reported the battle. "Why don't they surrender? They can't win." When the last human fell, the Valkyrie searched the ship. They found something strange. The ship's engine was rigged to explode. The humans had been fighting to buy time. If the Valkyrie hadn't discovered it, the explosion would have destroyed both ships. "This makes no sense," Krell said. "Why would they choose death over capture?" On the Valkyrie homeworld, an elderly alien named Professor Zex requested a meeting with the High Command. He was not Valkyrie but Galarian, a species known for their long lives and extensive knowledge of galactic history. "I must warn you about these humans," Professor Zex told them. His voice was thin with age. "I have studied thousands of species. Humans are different." General Drac laughed. "Different how? They are weak and primitive." "Have you studied their history?" asked the professor. "Humans fought thousands of wars against themselves. They developed weapons that could destroy their own planet. They survived disasters that should have ended their civilization multiple times." Ancient history dismissed Supreme Commander Voss. "Their current military is no match for ours." "You do not understand," insisted Professor Zex. "Humans are dangerous not because of their current weapons, but because of how they think. They are incredibly adaptive. When faced with a stronger enemy, they become more dangerous, not less." The High Command ignored his warnings. They laughed at the old professor's fears. Meanwhile, Commander Blackwood led a small team to a Valkyrie outpost where human prisoners were being held. Her ship was tiny and fast, designed to avoid detection. "Remember," she told her team, "this is a rescue mission. Get our people out quickly and quietly." But nothing went as planned. The Valkyrie discovered them almost immediately. In the firefight that followed, Susan's team was cut off from their ship. "We need a new plan," said one of her soldiers as enemy fire hit the wall beside them. Susan looked around at the alien technology surrounding them. Her mind worked quickly, seeing patterns and possibilities. "I have an idea," she said, "but it's going to be loud. Very loud." 2 hours later, the Valkyrie outpost exploded in flames as Susan's team escaped with all the prisoners. They had turned the Valkyrie's own defense systems against them. When news of the raid reached the Valkyrie High Command, the laughter stopped. For the first time, doubt crept in. Perhaps these humans were more dangerous than they appeared. Lieutenant Alex Carter stood before a group of alien allies in a secure meeting room. 3 species had secretly reached out to Earth, offering help against the Vrikari. They were smaller powers who had suffered under Vrikari aggression for years. Before we discuss strategy, Alex said, you need to understand what you're allying with. You need to understand humans. He touched a control panel. Images appeared on the wall screen. Ancient human warriors with spears, medieval knights in armor, modern soldiers with rifles. Humans have been fighting wars for our entire history, Alex explained. Not just against threats, but against each other. For land, for resources, for ideas. The aliens watched silently. One of them, a blue-skinned diplomat named Kiri, raised a tentacle. This is not unique, Kiri said. Many species fight wars. Alex nodded. True. But humans perfected war in ways most species never imagined. We turned it into a science. More images appeared. Ancient battle formations, guerrilla fighters hiding in jungles, modern special forces training. When the Vrikari attacked us, they expected us to fight according to galactic conventions of warfare, Alex continued. They expected us to meet their fleets in open space, to follow predictable patterns. One of the aliens, a reptilian creature named Dex, clicked his teeth nervously. And you don't. We adapt. Alex replied simply. Throughout our history, when faced with stronger enemies, humans found ways to even the odds. We developed tactics that seemed dishonorable to some, but effective to us. Meanwhile, in a distant star system, a lone human destroyer named the Defiant approached a Vrikari patrol of 3 warships. The Vrikari ships were larger and more heavily armed. They spotted us, reported the Defiant's sensor officer. They're moving to surround us. Captain Frank Martinez nodded calmly. Right where we want them. Begin Operation Trojan. The Defiant sent out a distress signal, appearing damaged and vulnerable. The Vrikari ships moved closer, eager for an easy kill. They're within range, said the weapons officer. Now, ordered Martinez. The Defiant suddenly released dozens of small objects. They looked like debris, but each contained a powerful explosive. At the same time, the ship's engines fired at full power, pulling away faster than the Vrikari expected. The Vrikari commander laughed. They're running away and dropping garbage behind them. Pathetic. Then the garbage exploded. The blasts created a chain reaction with the Vrikari ship's own weapon systems. All 3 warships were destroyed. The Defiant didn't survive either. Captain Martinez and his crew had known it was a one-way mission. They had volunteered anyway. Back at the Alliance meeting, Alex showed footage of the battle. 1 human ship for 3 Vrikari capital ships, he said quietly. We call it an acceptable trade. The aliens looked disturbed. This was not how wars were fought in the civilized galaxy. But the crew, started Kiri, volunteered. Alex finished. Because they knew their sacrifice would save more lives in the long run. In the Vrikari High Command, Supreme Commander Voss slammed his fist on the table. How are they predicting our movements? He demanded. We change our codes daily, yet they're always 1 step ahead. General Drac had no answer. The war was not going as planned. Humans didn't fight like any enemy they had faced before. Professor Zex was invited back to speak. This time, they listened. Humans evolved as predators, the old alien explained. Apex predators on their own world. They understand predatory thinking because they are predators themselves. What does that mean? Asked Commander Zira. It means they think like you do, replied Professor Zex. They can predict what you will do because they ask themselves, what would I do if I were hunting? And then they set traps accordingly. For the first time, fear flickered in the eyes of the Vrikari High Command. Then how do we defeat them? Asked Supreme Commander Voss. Professor Zex shook his head sadly. I'm afraid you already made your biggest mistake. You killed their young. He looked at each Vrikari commander in turn. There is nothing more dangerous in the galaxy than a human protecting its children, or a human seeking revenge for them. 6 months into the war, the tide had turned. The Vrikari, who had expected a quick victory, were now losing territory daily. Their once mighty empire was shrinking as humans pushed forward on multiple fronts. Sergeant Maria Vasquez lay perfectly still in the tall purple grass of planet Nexus 7. The colony had been under Vrikari control for 3 months. Maria and her team had been on the ground for 5 days, barely sleeping, watching and waiting. "Target convoy approaching," whispered Corporal Ryan Lee through their secure comm channel. 6 vehicles, 22 soldiers by my count. "Copy that," Maria replied. She checked her weapon one last time. "Everyone in position. Remember, we hit hard and fast." What followed was not a fair fight. The Vrikari never saw the attack coming. Maria's team had studied their patrol patterns, identified their weaknesses, and struck at the perfect moment. Within minutes, the convoy was destroyed and the human team disappeared back into the wilderness. This same scene was playing out across dozens of occupied worlds. Small human teams causing massive damage before vanishing. On a Vrikari command ship, Field Marshal Gorn reviewed the reports with growing concern. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. "These humans have been on the ground for days without rest or resupply. Our troops require regular breaks and food. The humans just keep going." The intelligence officer brought up an analysis of human physiology. "We've learned something disturbing about humans. They evolved as what they call persistence hunters. Before they had weapons, they would chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion." "What does that mean for us?" asked Gorn. "It means they can keep fighting long after our troops are exhausted. They can go days with minimal sleep and still function. Some of their soldiers have been awake for 72 hours straight and still complete complex missions." Field Marshal Gorn stared at the data in disbelief. No Vrikari could function without proper rest cycles. Their biology simply wouldn't allow it. In another part of space, a meeting of alien scientists and anthropologists was taking place. They had gathered to discuss the surprising human military success. "The most remarkable thing about humans," said Dr. Plex, a leading xenobiologist, "is not their technology, but their adaptability. They learn from every encounter." She showed the group examples of human equipment captured early in the war compared to current versions. "See how they modify their armor after first contact with Vrikari weapons. They've improved their shields to counter Vrikari energy signatures, and their weapons now exploit the weak points in Vrikari ship designs." "How quickly did they make these changes?" asked one observer. "Weeks," replied Dr. Plex. "Not years or decades as most species would require. Their industrial base completely reoriented for war production in less than a month." Back at Vrikari High Command, Supreme Commander Voss faced reality. The war was not winnable in its current form. "We must sue for peace," he told his commanders. "We can offer to return to the pre-war boundaries." "The humans will never agree," said Commander Zira. "They keep pushing forward." Nevertheless, the Vrikari sent peace envoys to Earth. They were surprised when Admiral Reeves agreed to meet them. "We offer a return to previous boundaries," said the Vrikari diplomat. "All hostilities will cease." Admiral Reeves listened patiently. When the Vrikari finished speaking, he leaned forward. "That would have been acceptable 6 months ago, before you attacked our civilians," he said calmly. "Now we require unconditional surrender and full reparations for the lives you took." The Vrikari diplomat was shocked. "But that would destroy our empire. Our people would lose everything." "You should have thought about that before you started this war," Reeves replied. His voice was not angry, just matter of fact. "You declared war on humanity. Now you'll see it through to the end." When the Vrikari High Command received this response, they couldn't comprehend it. In their history, reasonable compromises were always accepted. The human demand for total victory seemed extreme and unnecessary. "If they won't accept reasonable terms," declared Supreme Commander Voss, "then humans are a threat to galactic peace itself. They must be eliminated, no matter the cost. What the Vrikari failed to understand was that humans had one quality no other species had encountered before: the absolute refusal to give up, no matter the odds. The Vrikari launched their most desperate attack yet. A massive fleet jumped into Earth's solar system, bypassing the outer defense lines. Their target was Earth itself. If they could strike at the human homeworld, perhaps they could break their spirit. Commander Olivia Wright received the alert in Earth Defense Headquarters buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Warning lights flashed red across every screen. Vrikari fleet detected, announced the AI monitoring system. 214 warships. Estimated time to Earth orbit: 6 hours. Olivia's face remained calm as she pressed the emergency broadcast button. Her voice would now reach every human settlement in the solar system. This is Commander Wright. Earth Defense Protocol Dragon is now active. I repeat, Dragon is now active. Across Earth and throughout the solar system, people moved with practiced efficiency. This was not panic. This was preparation. For months, every human had trained for this possibility. In orbit, civilian space stations transformed. Hidden weapon systems emerged from what had appeared to be ordinary structures. Mining ships revealed military-grade shields. Even passenger liners carried surprise defenses. On Earth's surface, people moved into underground shelters. But these were not just hiding places. Each shelter contained manufacturing equipment. The entire human population was now part of the war effort. The Vrikari fleet approached confidently. Their sensors detected Earth's official military forces gathering to meet them. The human fleet was much smaller, only 48 warships. "This will be a glorious victory," said Fleet Admiral Krell to his officers. "Their pathetic defense will be crushed, and we will bombard their cities until they surrender." What the Vrikari didn't know was that Earth had been preparing for this moment since the first day of the war. The official fleet was just the visible part of their defense. As the Vrikari entered Earth orbit, Commander Wright gave another order: activate Sleeping Dragon. Suddenly, thousands of objects throughout the solar system came to life. Asteroids that were actually disguised weapon platforms, satellites that contained powerful energy weapons, even space debris that turned out to be smart mines. The Vrikari fleet found itself surrounded and under attack from all directions. "What is happening?" screamed Fleet Admiral Krell as his flagship shook from multiple impacts. "Where are these attacks coming from?" On his tactical display, new enemy signatures appeared every second. The space around Earth was alive with weapons that had been hiding in plain sight. Even more shocking to the Vrikari was when civilian ships joined the battle. Cargo vessels rammed into Vrikari warships at full speed. Passenger ships sacrificed themselves to protect military vessels. A Vrikari captain watched in horror through his view screen as a human mining vessel, clearly piloted by ordinary workers, not soldiers, deliberately collided with his cruiser's engines. "These humans are insane," he told his second-in-command. "They're sacrificing civilians. That's against all galactic war conventions." What he didn't understand was that for humans, there was no distinction between military and civilian when their home was threatened. Every human became a defender. In her command center, Olivia coordinated the battle with cold efficiency. Screens showed the Vrikari fleet being torn apart. Of the original 214 ships, less than 50 remained after just 2 hours. "They're retreating," reported her tactical officer with satisfaction. Olivia nodded. "Let some escape. We want them to tell the others what happened here." As the surviving Vrikari ships fled the solar system, they carried with them terrifying stories. The humans didn't just fight with their military. Their entire civilization was a weapon. Professor Zex met with the remaining Vrikari High Command members. Several chairs stood empty. Their occupants had been on ships destroyed in the failed Earth attack. "Now do you understand?" the old alien asked quietly. "Humans don't just use weapons. When threatened, they become weapons. Every one of them. Their entire society transforms." Supreme Commander Voss stared at the battle reports in disbelief. No species they had ever encountered fought this way. "We must strike back harder," he insisted, though with less conviction than before. Professor Zex shook his head sadly. "I fear you have awakened something that cannot be stopped. The humans will come for you now, and they will not show mercy." Admiral Reeves stood on the bridge of the flagship Invincible. The massive view screen showed hundreds of human warships assembled in formation. It was the largest fleet humans had ever built. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said his communications officer. Reeves nodded. "Begin the jump sequence. Destination: Fricari Prime." The human fleet vanished into hyperspace, bound for the heart of Fricari territory. The final offensive had begun. Captain Eric Russell led a team of 12 special operations soldiers. Their ship was tiny, designed to avoid detection. While the main fleet would engage the Fricari forces directly, Eric's team had a different mission. "We'll have one chance at this," Eric told his team as they approached Fricari Prime. "Our job is to infiltrate the Imperial Palace and capture their military command codes." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Sofia Garcia, studied the holographic map of their target. "Security will be extreme. The entire planet is on high alert. That's why they won't expect us to land right in the capital city," Eric replied with a grim smile. "Sometimes the boldest move is the safest." Their ship slipped through the Fricari defenses by hiding in the shadow of a cargo vessel. They landed in an industrial zone and quickly disguised themselves as maintenance workers. Meanwhile, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Fricari system. Alarms blared across every Fricari military installation. "Human fleet detected," shouted a Fricari officer. "Over 500 warships." Supreme Commander Voss could not believe the display. 6 months ago, humans had barely 40 military vessels. Now they had hundreds, all built while fighting a war across multiple fronts. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Professor Zex, who had remained as an advisor, answered quietly. "I tried to tell you. When humans mobilize for war, their entire civilization transforms. Every factory, every resource, every person is dedicated to the effort." The Fricari population watched in horror as the human fleet approached their homeworld. They had been told they were winning the war. Now enemy ships filled their skies. In the palace, Eric's team moved carefully through service corridors. Their disguises worked perfectly. Fricari were so convinced of their superiority that they never imagined humans could infiltrate their capital. "Command center ahead," whispered Sofia. "Guards at the entrance." Eric gave hand signals to his team. They moved with practiced precision. The guards were neutralized silently, and the team entered the command center. Inside, they found something they hadn't expected: data files for a doomsday weapon. The Fricari Emperor had ordered its construction in secret. If activated, it would create a chain reaction that would destroy not only Fricari Prime, but several nearby star systems. "We need to warn the fleet," Eric said urgently. He copied the files while his team secured the room. Aboard the Invincible, Admiral Reeves received Eric's message. The situation had suddenly become more complicated. If they pushed the Fricari too hard, the Emperor might activate the weapon out of desperation. "All ships hold position," Reeves ordered. "Do not advance further." The human fleet stopped its approach, maintaining a blockade formation around the planet. The Fricari Emperor, a massive figure named Drex, addressed his military council. "If the humans will not retreat, we will use the Void Catalyst," he declared. "Better to destroy everything than surrender to inferior beings." General Drac, once so confident, now looked alarmed. "My Emperor, the weapon will kill billions of our own people." "A necessary sacrifice," replied Emperor Drex coldly. "The Fricari Empire will never bow to humans." What neither the Emperor nor his generals realized was that Eric's team had planted devices throughout the palace. Every word they spoke was being transmitted to the human fleet. Reeves faced an impossible choice. If he ordered an attack, the Emperor might activate the weapon. If he retreated, the Vrikari would rebuild, and the war would continue. "Sir," said his strategic officer, "Captain Russell is requesting permission for an alternate approach." "What does he have in mind?" asked Reeves. "He wants to address the Vrikari people directly. Tell them the truth about the war and the weapon their leaders plan to use." Reeves considered this. It was a gamble, but perhaps the only way to end the war without billions more deaths. "Permission granted," he said finally. "Let's see if the Vrikari people are wiser than their leaders." 1 year had passed since the end of the war. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Conclave was filled once again with representatives from across the galaxy, but things were very different now. Lisa Daniels, once a military officer, now stood as Earth's ambassador to the Conclave. The blue uniform of the Earth Defense Fleet had been replaced by elegant diplomatic robes. "The rebuilding of the former Vrikari worlds continues ahead of schedule," she reported to the assembly. "With human assistance, their infrastructure is now 70% restored." The Vrikari representative, Council Leader Tavik, nodded in agreement. He represented the new Vrikari Federation, a democratic government that had replaced the fallen empire. Few could have predicted this outcome when Captain Russell had made his desperate broadcast to the Vrikari people. He had shown them proof of their emperor's plan to destroy their own world, rather than surrender. He had offered them a choice: continue following leaders who would sacrifice them, or take control of their own future. The response had shocked everyone. Ordinary Vrikari citizens had stormed the imperial palace. They had captured the emperor and his generals before they could activate the doomsday weapon. Now, a year later, humans and Vrikari worked side by side. Human doctors treated Vrikari wounded. Human engineers helped rebuild destroyed cities. The same determination that had made humans unstoppable in war now drove them to heal and rebuild. After the meeting, Ambassador Daniels walked through the gardens outside the conclave hall. A young Vrikari approached her hesitantly. He was barely an adult, his scales still bright with youth. "Ambassador, may I speak with you?" he asked. Lisa smiled. "Of course. What can I help you with?" "My name is Krell. I lost my parents in the war," the young Vrikari said. "Now I study at a school rebuilt by humans. My teachers are human. The doctors who treated my injuries were human." He seemed confused as he continued. "I need to understand something. When you had defeated us, why didn't you just destroy us? You had the power. Our leaders would have done that to you." Lisa considered her answer carefully. "Destroying an enemy is easy, Krell. Building something together is harder, but more worthwhile." "But we killed your people first," Krell insisted. "We attacked without true provocation." "Yes, you did," Lisa acknowledged, "and we fought back with everything we had. But humans learned something important from our own bloody history. They walked together past flowering plants from a dozen worlds. The most dangerous weapon humans possess isn't our technology or our persistence," Lisa explained. "It's our ability to choose, to decide when not to use violence, even when we could." Krell thought about this. "My history teacher said humans are dangerous because you can be ruthless, but valuable because you can be merciful." Lisa smiled. "That's a good way to put it." Across the garden, Admiral Reeves, now retired, was speaking with delegates from several species. They were discussing a joint defense pact with Earth. "Make humans your enemies, and you will regret it," one delegate was saying. "But make them your allies, and you will never fear aggression again." The old admiral nodded but added, "Just remember, the choice to be peaceful is exactly that. A choice, one we make daily." As the sun set over the conclave, representatives from 30 species gathered for a formal dinner. Human and Vrikari sat side by side, former enemies now working toward a common future. A toast was raised by the conclave speaker, to understanding between worlds. In a quiet moment, Professor Zex approached Lisa. The elderly alien looked pleased. "You know," he said, "there's a new saying spreading through the galaxy. Make friends with humans, for they are the most dangerous enemies and the most valuable allies in the known universe. Lisa raised her glass. To friendship, then. Across the stars, on worlds once ravaged by war, humans and Vakari worked together to build something new. The same determination that had made humans lethal in battle now made them extraordinary in peace. The most dangerous species in the galaxy had proven something important. True strength lies not just in the ability to fight, but in knowing when to stop fighting and start building.